Thanks for listening.
I don't know if I should comfort you also, but there's a Chinese saying that, you know, when the boat is approaching to the harbor, you know, it will go straight by itself eventually. Means that things will always come around. 就是船到桥头自然直哈。So first of all, I would like to maybe give some feedback to you. In a way, I must. You know, it's comforting to hear there are still sanctions in the world, because normally when there are sanctions and censorships for arts, eventually the prices will go up, you know, will roll up, you know, like sky high after they relieve the sanctions. So maybe it's not the best things, you know. We have to have the pressure and to have the counter pressure to bounce back. And so this is, now I would like to just raise some questions, you know, as comments, as feedbacks. You know, I don't expect really answers, especially I know you are in a rush. But there are some observations I had already in my mind through all this year, and especially on top of what you talk about, you two talk about. First of all, I've already mentioned that whenever it becomes impossible for us to collect all the data, so as the art pieces, is that still worthwhile, you know, to keep creating spaces for collection, or to find potential collectors to invest more, or shall we adopt another strategy? The same story is, that's why 2 years ago, with the help of my friends in Europe, we created a special feature exhibition for Taipei Book Fair. It's called Impossible Library. But all the works are the artist books created by artists dated back to 50s, 60s, up to now. So artists were like a prophet. So instead of getting their artist books exhibited once more in major art museums, they found their places, you know, in book fairs instead. So this is a question. My first feedback. Secondly, I would ask: is there ever more divided collection or the taste between that antiquities or the domestic arts and international art, or so-called contemporary arts? So because, you know, now you are all talk about, but for me, I hold quite an alternative way of looking at this, because for me, all arts have been contemporary. So somehow I don't really understand since when we become so divided, you know, between the antiquities or so-called the classic arts and contemporary arts. So same story is only ever since the 20th century, musicians started to play nothing but classic music, almost. What I mean is for concerts and so on. They don't really play contemporary composers, classic music. So it's a very different thing. So, and the other thing is that I find it's interesting that instead of in the 70s or 80s or up to 90s, nowadays is a new trend, if I could say so. Collectors tend to act as curators, critics, or journalists themselves. And in the past, normally, okay, artists would love to become a curator from time to time, or journalists might eventually turn themselves into curators. Because, you know, you talk about that the decision for the collection is actually a curatorial decision. So, but then as a paradox now, if a collector decided to be a curator himself, then I mean, which comes first? And the last thing I would say is that, okay, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, and the other thing you both mentioned, and we also find the problem is the problem about everything get lost in translation. Yeah, so, and only those ones who can afford to get their publications, catalogs, or statements translated in major languages, they get more publicities and more opportunities to be seen or heard. And so I don't know, do you have the similar problem? For instance, we expect our government to invest some more money. If they don't want to invest in collecting art, or at least they should invest some money in publications in major languages. And the last thing is to share with you. Actually, I realized that we have so similar evolution or development for contemporary art in Taiwan. So, for instance, you talk about like in 1977, you started to have the very first museum for contemporary art, right? And it's the same story. In 1978, Taiwan was basically replaced by People's Republic China. We were forced to withdraw from United Nations. And so, but it has happened to be the first time government was serious about getting use of art and culture as the national development strategy. It's very interesting when the country was really off the international circuits. So they make the white paper on how to develop art education, art museums, and Ministry of Culture in 1978. That's why we ended up with the very first École des Beaux-Arts, Academy of Fine Arts in Taipei, and then also opened the very first art museum in Taipei in 1983. So it's 78 is also interesting year for you. And so maybe we share much more similarities. And it's the same story. We've been through the bubble economy, collapsed and then came back. And so in a way, but I don't know, I don't get worried, but just like up to 10 years ago, there was a high peak, the peak for biennials. And am I right to say that we are moving on the peak of art fairs? Just like at the turn of the century, from 19th century to 20th century. And because, of course, I will be happy, more delighted to see that Art Dubai also flourish, like the Art Taipei. But instead of biennials, much more biennials at the end of the 1990s, at the beginning of the 21st century. Now we seem to have much more art fairs flourishing everywhere. So are we moving on to the epoch of art fair? Yeah, so.
Where to start?
No, you can
May I go first?
Yeah, please.
First of all, I attended the opening speeches of this fair a few days ago, and the government officials promised some additional funding for contemporary arts. That's something that we don't see in Turkey, at least not in the past 20 years or ever. So everything is funded by private initiative, private, including corporate. And independence from state funding may have its positives, but it doesn't make any difference in terms of, whoever puts in the money also makes the rules. So we certainly talk about the power of those private funders, collectors, or on the corporate front, being too much having too much power, being in a position to influence where the art scene goes in Istanbul. Maybe that's also a motivation for Collectorspace to show how we can moderate that power by understanding, you know, what the responsible collectors have done and what they have achieved without abusing that power or the resources that they have. But the reality is that there is not a very strong control mechanism on what money does on the art production. In terms of collectors curating, I think that has been done regularly, because people hang their paintings on their walls, and it's a sort of curating. So maybe every collector is a curator, but the question whether they are a good one is certainly open. But it's part of the same idea that collectors have gained a lot of power lately. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are uncomfortable about it, but it's a fact of the current state.
Yeah, and about the art fairs and like Art Dubai and Art Abu Dhabi, when we're talking about like these two art fairs, I mean specifically these two art fairs, we need to consider like the history and background of UAE, like, and the very short amount of time that actually the whole country developing into future. I would say still culture, art, and all these like methods are either misconcepted in UAE or still is a missing part of the puzzle. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, like I went to Art Abu Dhabi for. I mean, first was like Paris Abu Dhabi Art Fair, and then independent Abu Dhabi Art Fair. I went to most of the editions. This year, surprisingly compared to last year, I was talking to Karim Jan earlier, I mean, yesterday about it. I saw like developments. I mean, I saw like it's more established now. The galleries, they know why they are the audience. They know somehow they know what they want to see. Like, so it was more established. But I would say like, as in like a 4th, 5th edition of an art fair, still isn't kind of strong art fair for the region, which is like we don't have such an example. I mean, probably the most international art. When I say like international, I mean in terms of like, I mean there wasn't this Taiwanese gallery that I was talking to said like, why did you choose to be in Art Abu Dhabi? And then it's just like because this is a showcase place for Middle East. Like we can't go to Iran. We can't. I mean, shall we go to Syria? Where else shall we go? I mean, this is the international marketplace to be and to be seen. Where is not mature or not professional enough, it's the only one. So when it's the only option, this is how it goes. But then in terms of art fairs getting updated, yeah, possibly, but I don't know. What would be the next? I have to think about that. I'm not sure.
If I may add. Well, I consider contemporary art a graduate level study, if you like, because typically artists have graduate degrees and curators have graduate degrees. Collectors don't, not in art. I mean, they may have MBAs, but typically they don't have a formal education in contemporary art. I think that is one issue that creates a problem when collector becomes curator, or collector becomes a decision maker in an institution. So there needs to be this understanding that the level of understanding of collectors has to be raised in general. Clearly there are collectors that are as well versed in contemporary art as curators. I mean, again, these are all bell-shaped curves, but I'm talking about the averages. This also connects to the maybe future of art fairs, because there's an expectation that collectors are looking for a certain type of art, and galleries and dealers are presenting that type of art in the art fairs, but the artists and curators are engaged in a different type of production, or at least that's where they want to go, that's where their mind is, but they are also producing some of the works that collectors are demanding, or at least that's what is believed. So, frankly, you know, I don't get very excited when I visit an art fair, because I don't get the same intellectual stimulation in an art fair that I see at a biennial, and I don't see any reason why the same works that are being shown at the biennial are not at the fair.